The Zephyrian prison camp on Kepler 438b had held thousands of prisoners from dozens of species over its 50-year operation. Commander Vexhai had overseen the facility for the last decade, perfecting the art of breaking spirits through calculated deprivation. Each species had its weakness. The aquatic mirrorland withered without proper humidity. The silicon-based quartz folk grew brittle in acidic conditions, and nearly every carbon-based life form eventually surrendered to hunger. When they brought in the human, Vexhai barely glanced up from his reports. Another soft-skinned biped from the Terran Federation, probably some low-ranking soldier captured during the border skirmishes. The creature stood barely 2 meters tall, with unremarkable brown hair and curious dark eyes that seemed to catalog everything in the intake chamber. "Species?" Vexhai asked his aide without looking up. "Human, sir. Designation, Marcus Chen, Engineering Specialist 3rd Class. Standard Protocol 7, minimal nutrition, solitary confinement. These mammals usually break within 10 cycles." Marcus Chen was assigned to Cell Block D, a cramped ferrocrete box with a single waste disposal unit and a narrow slot for food delivery. The Zephyrians provided him with their standard starvation ration, a gray paste containing exactly 800 calories of basic proteins and carbohydrates, just enough to prevent immediate death, but far below what most species required for long-term survival. For the first week, Marcus behaved predictably. He ate the meager portions, exercised to maintain muscle mass, and spent hours staring at the walls. The guards reported nothing unusual, except perhaps an odd habit of the human collecting and examining small debris that filtered through the ventilation system. By the second week, something changed. Marcus had begun refusing portions of his rations, pushing aside nearly half of each meal. The guards assumed he was entering the depression phase, a common precursor to complete psychological breakdown. Vexhai noted it in his files with satisfaction. But Marcus wasn't depressing. He was planning. The human had noticed something the Zephyrians had overlooked in their sterile prison design. The facility was alive with opportunity. The gray paste might be nutritionally minimal, but it served as an excellent growing medium. The moisture from the waste disposal unit created perfect humidity. And the debris from the ventilation system, tiny spores, seeds, and microorganisms from the planet's surface, contained everything a clever engineer might need. Marcus had started a garden. Using torn fabric from his prison uniform, he created small growing beds in the corners of his cell. The spores he'd collected germinated in the nutrient-rich paste, growing into small but calorie-dense fungi. A fragment of reflective metal from a damaged ventilation grate focused the dim light from his ceiling fixture into a concentrated beam that accelerated photosynthesis in the green shoots that sprouted from wind-blown seeds. The waste disposal unit, designed to break down organic matter, could be reverse-engineered. By introducing specific organic compounds, easily created by allowing portions of his rations to ferment in carefully controlled conditions, Marcus discovered he could trigger the unit to produce a protein-rich sludge that, while unappetizing, was far more nutritious than anything the Zephyrians provided. By the third week, Marcus was consuming nearly 2,000 calories daily. By the fourth, he had enough surplus to begin preserving food for storage. He used the temperature differential between the cell's corners to create a crude dehydration system, storing concentrated nutrients in hollow spaces he'd carved into the ferrocrete walls using a sharp fragment of his meal tray. The guards noticed. The human had stopped losing weight, but attributed it to species variation. Some prisoners took longer to break than others. By the 6th week, Marcus had achieved something unprecedented in the camp's history. He was gaining weight. His improvised ecosystem now included 3 varieties of edible fungi, a small hydroponic garden growing in repurposed waste containers, and a fermentation system that converted his basic rations into a rich, probiotic-filled paste that improved his digestive efficiency. But Marcus wasn't content with mere survival. He had begun to understand the prison's broader ecosystem. Food deliveries followed predictable patterns, guard rotations created opportunities, and the waste disposal system connected to a larger network that served the entire facility. In the 7th week, Marcus made contact with other prisoners. Using the waste disposal network as a primitive communication and distribution system, he began sharing his agricultural knowledge. The quartz folk learned to cultivate silicon processing bacteria that improved their mineral intake. The Merlin discovered how to create moisture-rich fungal colonies. Within days, word of the human gardener had spread throughout the camp. Vex High first noticed the problem when the camp's waste disposal systems began operating at 300% of normal capacity. Then came reports of unusual growths in multiple cell blocks. By the time his engineers identified fungal colonies throughout the prison's infrastructure, it was too late. The prisoners weren't just surviving, they were thriving. And they were learning from each other. The final straw came when Vex High's aide reported that the human had somehow gained 15 kilograms since his arrival. Security footage showed Marcus Chen in his cell, calmly tending to what appeared to be a small farm, his once loose prison uniform now straining against visibly improved muscle mass. How? Vex High demanded. How does a prisoner gain weight on 800 calories per day? His chief engineer, having spent days analyzing the impossible situation, delivered his report with barely concealed admiration. Sir, the human didn't just adapt to our containment protocols. He turned them into advantages. He's created a closed-loop agricultural system using nothing but prison waste, environmental debris, and pure ingenuity. According to our calculations, he's producing nearly 3,000 calories daily from resources we didn't even know existed. Vex High stared at the monitor showing Marcus Chen, who was currently sharing what appeared to be fresh vegetables with 2 other prisoners through an ingenious dumbwaiter system he'd constructed in the waste disposal network. And the other prisoners? Learning fast, sir. Productivity in the labor camps has actually increased by 200% since they improved their nutrition. Some are requesting additional work shifts because they have surplus energy. That night, Vex High made a decision that would echo throughout Zephyrian military doctrine for generations. He walked to cell block D and opened Marcus Chen's door. Marcus looked up from where he was harvesting what appeared to be small tomatoes, his face showing genuine surprise at seeing the facility commander. Human, Vex High said carefully. We need to discuss terms. Marcus Chen smiled, wiping his hands on a cloth made from woven fungal fibers. I was wondering when you'd want to talk. Would you like some fresh vegetables? I've got more than enough to share. As Vex High accepted a small, perfectly ripe tomato from the human who had transformed starvation into abundance, he realized that the Terran Federation's reputation for producing dangerous individuals might need serious revision. They weren't just dangerous in battle, they were dangerous in ways no one had ever imagined.